Hello guys, today we are discussing API interview questions, and let's begin. What is an API? API stands for application no programming interface, which is useful for communicating between different systems. It facilitates data exchange between the system located in a different remote place. API is a collection of a functions that are executed by the other functions of application like a web desktop, iOS app, and the Android APK. What is API testing? API application programming interface is a computing interface that enable communication and data exchange between two separate softwares. A software system that execute an API, including several functions, subroutines that another software system can perform. API define request that can made how to make a request data format that can be used. What is API testing and why is important in software development? API testing is a process of testing application programming interface to ensure that they meet the functional performance, security, and reliability requirements. API allow different software system to communicate and exchange data. API testing is a crucial in a software development because it's verify the correct behavior, functionality, and integration of API. Ensure they work as intended and enable a seamless interaction between the different component of application or between different applications. How does SOAP compare to REST? REST or representational state transfer is a architectural style rather than the protocol. What is the means that they provide the more flexibility in a term of how you structure your message, which format you use, and how the client and server scales. SOAP in a other hand they require a tight coupling between the client and server. If their side change something goes wrong, hence the it's a protocol nature. SOAP nature strict protocol and REST nature architecture pattern. SOAP is stateful and stateless. REST is state stateless. For SOAP format XML and REST format XML and JSON as and HTML and plain text. SOAP message envelope and REST message postcard. SOAP transfer protocol HTTPS, HTTPE and FTP and TCP, SMTP, XMPP and REST transfer protocol HTTP, HTTPS. SOAP logic exposure WSDL and the rate also WADLs and the SOAP caching and REST HTTP caching. SOAP security WS security ASET HTTPS and SSL and REST security HTTPS and SSL and SOAP speed slow and REST speed fast and learning curve SOAP difficult to learn and REST easy to learn. What are the advantages of API testing? The test for core functionality. API testing provides the access to the application without user interface. The core code level functionality of the application will be tested and evaluate early before the UI test. This will help detect the minor issue which can become bigger during the GUI testing. The effective API testing usually is a less time consuming than functional GUI testing. The element in GUI testing must be pulled, which makes the testing process slower. Particularly, API tests automatically require less code, so it can provide the better and faster coverage compared to the GUI test automation. These will result cost saving and for the testing project. Language independent. In the API testing, data is exchanged using XML or JSON format. These transfer mode are completely language dependent. Independent also user to select any coding language edge when adopting automation testing services for a project. Easy integration with GUI. API test enable highly integrable test, which particularly useful if the performance functional GUI test after API testing. For instance, simple integration would allow to new user be created with the application before the GUI test is started. What is the difference between web services and API? Web services, all the web services are API, and all API not web services. It supports XML and API response are formatted uses web apps media type formatter into XML, JSON or any other format. You need a SOAP protocol to send or receive data over the network. There is a does not have a lightweight architecture. API has a lightweight architecture. It can be used by any client who understand XML. It can be used by client who understand the JSON or XML. Web services use three style REST, SOAP, and XML RPC for communication. API can be used for any style of communication. It provides support only for HTTP protocol. It provides the support HTTP protocol request to response header. What are the HTTPS status code? Browser and server interact via hyper transfer protocol status code. The browser transmit your request to server which when then deliver a response when you use the internet to seek information from the server. The HTTP status code which misinformed the browser of request the status and whether or not something went gone wrong, and as well as the reason for error is a component of that response. The request page, the client browser and the server are among the detail carried by HTTP header for request and answer. These detail determine the status code. What are the common HTTP status codes? Informational response. 100 is a continue. This response means everything is a functioning properly and can process. The code indicate the server is a processing the request and can complete it. The 100 code is interim response and tell you to request has not caused or an error. 101 switching a protocol. The server received the data request and can complete this. The server however change the protocol based on the information in upgrade header field. This status code does not indicate an error. 102 processing. The server received the request, but there is not any response yet. The server is processing the request which ongoing. This code also indicate an error has not occurred. Success 2 double X success. The client accept the request is processed successfully at a server. 203 non-authoritative information. The written data does not match the data validation available on the server. This often can indicate the data arrive via proxy source or of the server that can contain the original data. This code means the server received 200 OK from its origin but returned the modified version of a response. 204 no content. The server sent the code when it received understood the request with this code through the server is singling. It has no data to return. Even though there no content to send, this code indicate the HTTP header proper. 205 reset content. The server has a complete the request, but there was a problem. This code represent a correctable error. You can also solve by the resetting the document view and again. 3xx redirects indicate that the client must take the additional order to complete the request. Most of the code related to this series are URL redirection. 300 multiple choice says the request has more than one potential response. The server often send the report. This code that indicate a list of a potential choice to get the data you can choose from the response the server provider. 301 move up permanently. This code indicates the URL no longer exists is broken. This means message often includes the new URL for you to use. It also signifies to the user update all the reference to this URL. 302 found the uniform resource identifier URI change, but the change is not a permanent. A 302 found means more change might occur in the future. So consider using the new URI complete request. The code is a one way to create temporary redirection. 305 uses proxy. The request need to use a server proxy to complete successful. This means tell the user to send the request. The send request will be go to the server proxy which can provide the data. 3007 temporary redirect. This response means uniform resource identifier is a different has to use a new temporary URI return data. This code also indicated 4xx client error. 400 bad request. This code indicate a invalid syntax prevent this server from the receiving request. Server returned this code when the request made error and should correct the before trying again. This code means the client used invalid message framing or improperly routed the message. 401 unauthorized. The server can't complete the request. The server believes the user does not have the authorization to receive data. After sending code, a server won't complete the request until the authentication happen. 403 the server understood the request but refused to fulfill it. Sometime the user does not have the access to request content or data. the server reject the request. This also means the client need account to request data, or request would create a duplicate record. 4, 404 not found. The 404 is one of the most common code uh, servers send. The error, the error message, the server can't find the information in the location now, but it might be able to in the future. It also occur when a page is a new location, but user did not provide the old one with a redirect. 408 request timeout. This code means request took too long to process. It also could indicate the required didn't make it through the server. Sometime internet provide it can interrupt the process, but the user can try it. 4, 410 gone. The information a user request from the server no longer exists. This code means the information exists at one point, but it does not anymore. The server also can't tell you where the information exists or else. 422 unprocessable entity. The request was well found but unable to found the due to statement 4029 in too many requests, and the user has sent too many requests in a given amount of time. 5 double X server error. 500 internal server error. A generic error message is given when the unexpected condition was encountered. No more specific messages are suitable. 501 not implemented. The, thus, the server either does not recognize the request method or lack of the ability to fulfill the request. Usually, this implies future ability. New feature of the web services API 502 bad request. The server was acting as a gateway or proxy and receive an invalid response from the upstream server. 503 service unable. The server can't find the handle the request because it is overloaded or down for maintenance. Generally this is a temporary state. 40504 gateway timeout. The server was acting uh, as a gateway proxy and did not receive a response from the upstream. 505 HTTP version not supported. The server does not support the HTTP protocol version the request. What are the common API testing types? While there are certainly specifically and test and no list can ask to compressive in the real, and most tests fit broadly into the following 9 categories that you should remember before the attending an API interview. First is uh, validation testing, functional testing, UI testing, load testing, run testing, error detection, security testing, penetration testing, fuzz testing, in, inoperability by AWS compliance testing. Explain the main difference between UI testing and API testing. UI focus user of an application, API focus functionality and behavior of API, and UI interaction. involve interacting with a graphical element, and API interaction directly calls the API endpoint and verifies the response. U- UI concern user experience, and API if content concern data validation, integration, and security performance. And UI scope verifies the application visual appearance, and API scope validation, API response and data. And UI dependencies depend on the UI and its component, and API dependencies independent of UI component. And UI test label usually perform the end of the development cycle, and the API testing level is performed at the initial system level. And UI tools automatically like the Selenium APM etc. API testing look like a Postman and REST assurance. What is the procedure to perform API testing? Choose the suits to add the API test cases, and choose the test development mode, and demand the development of test cases for required API method. Configure the control parameters of application, and then test condition. Configure method validation. Execute the API test. Check the report and filter API test cases. What is what must check when performing API testing? During API testing process, a request rise to the API with known data. This way you can analyze the validation response while testing the API. An API you should consider accuracy of data, schema validation, HTTPS status code, data type, data validation order, and completeness, and authorized checks, implementation of response timeout, error code in a case API return, and non-functional testing like performance and security. What are different between API testing and unit testing? API testing conducted by QA team, and unit testing conducted by development team. And API testing mostly black box testing. Unit testing is a white box testing. Aim to access the full functionality of the system, for it will be employed by the end user external developer who will use your API. Used to verify whether the each unit in isolation perform as expected or not. And API testing often run the build is ready, and author do not have access to the source code. Each of the code modules must be the unit testing before begin the build by the document. What are the major challenges faced in API testing? You can overcome the challenges in API testing: parameter section, parameter combination, call sequencing, output verification and validation. Another important challenge is providing into value, which is a very difficult to GUI is not available in the case. What are what are the testing methods that come under the API testing? They are unit testing and functional testing. Loading testing to test the performance under the load. Discover the testing to list. Create, delete the number of calls document in API. Usability, reliability testing to get the consistent result. Security and penetration to validate the all type authentication. Automation testing to create and run the script require the regular API calls. End to end integration, web UI testing, and API documentation testing determine the efficiency and effectiveness. What is REST? REST is representational state transformation. Transfer is an architectural style for developing web services that exploit it and ubiquity of HTTP protocol and use the HTTP method to define action. It revolves around a source where the every component is resource that can be accessed through a share interface using standard HTTP method. In REST architecture, REST server provide the access to resource and REST client access and makes these resources available. Here is resources identified by URI or global IDs, and REST uses multiple ways to represent this resource such as a text, JSON, and XML and JSON. And nowadays, the most popular representation of resources. What is RESTful web services? Mostly two kind of web services that should be remembered in API testing. First, so simple object access protocol, an XML based method to expose web services. Web services develop in a REST style and refer to the RESTful web services. These web services use HTTP method to implement the concept of the REST architecture. A RESTful web services usually define URI information, uniform resource identifier, a service that provides a resource representation like JSON and a set of HTTP method. What are the some key characteristics of REST? Key characteristic of a REST likely the web API testing interview. So please get answer the ready in your mind with these two ones. REST is a stateless. Therefore, the server has no status codes or session data within with the well applied REST API. The server could be started between two calls. Since all the data transfer to the server, web web services use the post method and primarily to perform the operation while the rest uses get for accessing resource. What is the messaging in a RESTful web services? RESTful web services uses the HTTP protocols as a communication tool between the client and the server. The technique that when the client send the message in the form of HTTP request, server send the back HTTP reply is called messaging. This message com- comprise the message data and metadata that is the information on the message itself. Is there any difference between put and post operation? Put and post operation are quite similar. Expected for the term of the result generated by them. Put operation it important so you can catch the response while the responding the post operation and not catchable. And if you try to request n time, you will end up having n resource with n different URI created on the server. In a web API testing interview, you should give the specific example put and post operation to make crystal clear interviewer below the example. Scenario, let's say we are design a network application. Let's list down the few URI and there the purpose to get know when the post and when the put operation. Get get all the devices. Post create a new device and get device to information, identify ID, put update the device information by the ID, delete the device by ID. What is the URI? What is the main purpose of the REST based web services, and what is the format? URI stand for Uniform Resource Identifier. It is a string. It is a string characters designed for the ambiguous identification of the resource and extendedly via the URI scheme. The purpose of URI is locate a resource on the server hosting the web services. A URI format is a protocol service name slash resource type slash ID. What is the payload in a RESTful web service? The payload is the data you can interested in transporting. This is a differentiate from the thing that wrap their data for transport like HTTPS request and response header authentication. What is the upper limit for payload to pass in the most method? The post are the append the data to the server URL, but its size shouldn't exceed maximum URL length. However, doesn't have any such a limit. So theoretically, a user can pass ultimate data as a payload to the post method. But if you consider the real use cases, then sending the post with the large payload with consume the more bandwidth. It itself take more time and present the performance challenges to your server. Hence, the user can take accordingly.